is Lecture 1, Week 1, the skin, structure, disorders, and diseases. Okay, let's get right into it. These are some of the objectives we're going to be learning today. For one, describe the structure and divisions of the skin. This is throughout the chapter, I'm sorry. 2, list the functions of the skin. Identify and describe common primary and secondary skin lesions. Describe common skin inflammations and infections. Also, list and describe disorders of the sebaceous and pseudophorus glands. List and describe types of skin pigmentations. Identify common skin hypertrophies. And also identify and describe types of skin cancer. All right, question. Why should we even study the skin, its structure, disorders, and diseases? Well, as master hair care specialist, you're primarily dealing with client skin. Now, although some services, some disorders that relate to the client's skin, we do not have the license to treat them. However, some skin disorders that we'll go over, such as malignant melanoma, which is a type of skin cancer, if a keenly eyed barber can identify in its early stages, you can actually save the life of one of your clients. So, and what it also do is helps you become a more well-rounded individual as a barber. Okay, now the anatomy of the skin. Well, dermatology. You probably heard of this term before. Dermatology is a branch of medical science that pertains to the study of the skin, its nature, structure, functions, diseases, and treatment. What is a dermatologist? A dermatologist is a physician who specializes in the treatment of the skin, hair, and nails. You probably heard that term. You'll go to your primary care physician. Maybe you have acne or pimples or some other type of skin disorder, and the doctor will refer you to a dermatologist. Dermatologists are skin doctors. Okay, how do you identify the healthy skin? As we know, or if we don't know, the skin is actually the largest organ of the body. It actually has a primary function of serving as our outer coat and protecting all of our internal organs. But what does healthy skin look like? Well, it's slightly moist, soft, and flexible with a smooth, fine-grained texture. The slightly acidic pH of healthy skin provides a protective barrier against organisms that touch to or try to enter it. Now, skin is actually thinnest on the eyelids and thickest on the palms of the hands and the sole of the feet. Think about it. You know, the soles of the feet's pretty much on the floor all day. And some people, our evolutionists, may argue that we evolved from walking on fours, which is the palm of our hands, to now walking on twos. So the skin would be thickest there, and it's thinnest on your eyelids. Okay, let's move on. The anatomy of the skin. Before we go into that, we want to talk about different appendages of the skin. Appendage, like an appendix in a book, is something that you add on. But some of the appendages of the skin are your hair, nails, sweat glands, and oil glands. Now, your skin is divided into two main layers. It's your epidermis, then it is your dermis. Now, you have a bottom layer under that, which is called subcutaneous tissue, which we'll talk about, but let's talk about these two in a nutshell. So what is the epidermis? The epidermis is your outer layer. That's the skin that you see. It's also called cuticle or scarf skin. It is the outermost protective and thinnest layer of the skin. It contains no blood vessels, has many small endings. Now, we have 5 different layers of the epidermis, as you can see in this photo. Stratum corneum, which is the top. Right under that is stratum lucidum. Then you have the stratum granulosum. Then you have stratum spinosum. And the bottom layer of the epidermis is called the stratum germinativum. Okay, let's go over a few of these. Now, your stratum corneum is the top layer of the epidermis. It's also called the horny layer. This is the layer we see when we look at somebody. You have cells that are made up of fibrous protein, which is called keratin, which combines with a thin layer of oil, which is also called sebum, to help make the stratum corneum a protective, waterproof layer. So just remember, your stratum corneum is your horny layer. That's the part that we see. It has cells that help make up, that come from protein called keratin. Okay, now the right under the stratum corneum is the stratum lucidum. The stratum lucidum is called the clear layer. It's under the corneum, and it consists of small transparent cells through which light can pass. Okay, right under the stratum lucidum is the stratum granulosum, or the granular layer. Granules, those are like what you would call like salt particles. You know how salt looks, grains of salt. Grains, granulosum. They consist of cells that look like distinct granules and are filled with keratin. Keratin is synonymous with protein. These cells are almost dead and are pushed to the surface to replace cells that are shed from the corneum. Okay, so the next one under the stratum granulosum is the stratum spinosum. That's your spiny layer. Spinosum, spiny layer. It is often classified as part of the germinativum, but it is a sublayer that lies above the basal strata and beneath the stratum granulosa. The process that causes the skin cells to shed begins in the stratum spinosum. Okay. Now, the bottommost layer of the epidermis is the stratum germinativum. It's also called the malpighian or basal cell layer. This is the deepest layer of the epidermis. This layer is responsible for the growth of the epidermis. It also contains melanocytes, which produce a dark pigment called melanin. Pigment is another word for color. Melanin helps protect the sensitive cells below from the destructive effects of excessive exposure to ultraviolet light. Okay, so let's review. 5 layers of the epidermis: the corneum, lucidum, granulosum, spinosum, and germinativum. Those all in that order are in the that are in the epidermis. Okay, so under your epidermis, which is the outer layer of the skin, is called the dermis. We also call the dermis the derma, corium, cutis, or true skin. The dermis is actually roughly 25 times thicker than the epidermis, and it consists of a highly sensitive vascular layer of connective tissue. Within its structure are numerous blood vessels, nerves, lymph and oil glands, hair follicles, erector pili muscles, and papillae. The dermis consists of 2 layers, the papillary or the superficial layer, and also the reticular or deeper layer. Okay, if you look at this chart, it has a visual of the skin. To the top, you can see the layers, the sublayers of the epidermis. And then you can see the dermis. Okay, you have your oil glands and all of that good stuff in there. Okay, now let's talk about the two layers of the dermis. You have the papillary layer. The papillary lies directly beneath the stratum germinativum of the epidermis. So we said the stratum germinativum is the outer layer, the deepest layer of the epidermis, and the papillary layer is the first layer of the dermis. That's why they meet. What does it do? Well, it contains elastic tissue called papillae that point upward into the epidermis. Some of these papillae contain loop capillaries, which are small blood vessels. Others contain small structures called tactile corpuscles with nerve fiber endings that are sensitive to touch and pressure. This layer also contains some melanin. Melanin is another word for pigment. That space at the top is the epidermal-dermal junction where the two layers meet. Okay, your next layer, your deeper layer of the dermis is called the reticular layer. It supplies the skin with oxygen and its nutrients. The reticular layer contains the following structures within its network. You have fat cells, sweat glands, blood vessels, hair follicles, lymph glands, erector pili muscles, and also oil glands. So just know the papillary layer is the top layer of the dermis. It pretty much helps connect the dermis and the epidermis. And the reticular layer supplies the skin with its oxygen and its nutrients. It's the deeper layer of the dermis. All right. Under both of them are what you would call subcutaneous tissue, or what we may say is adipose tissue. That's your fatty tissue under the dermis. They vary in thickness according to age, gender, and general health. But what it does, the subcutaneous tissue gives smoothness and contour to the body, contains fats for use as energy, and also acts as a protective cushion for the outer skin. So when you pressing in your skin and you feel your skin, it feels cushiony, that's your sub or adipose tissue that you feel. Okay, let's move on. Please, the anatomy of the skin is important. You have charts on page 224, 223 and 224. Review them. Get familiar with the anatomy of the skin, because a big portion of your tests will contain some information in regards to that. Okay, fluids of the skin. Blood and lymph supply nourishment to the skin in the form of protein, carbohydrates, and fat. 1/2 to 2/3 of the body's blood supply is distributed to the skin. As the blood and lymph circulate through the skin, they deliver materials for growth, nourishment, and repair of the skin, hair, and nails. Okay, this is very important, but that's amazing. 1/2 to 2/3 of our blood supply goes to the skin. And it kind of makes sense since the skin is the largest organ. Okay. Now, let's talk about nerves. Okay, for my anatomy students that's already taken the anatomy chapter, you guys already discussed motor, sensory, and maybe secretory nerves. Okay, motor, something that moves. Motor nerves carry impulses from the brain to control muscle movement. Sensory, they react to your senses. Heat, cold, touch, pressure, and pain. Now, your secretory, that usually relates to some type of fluid. They're distributed to your sweat and oil glands of the skin. Secretory nerves regulate the excretion of perspiration from the sweat glands and the flow of sebum from the oil glands to the surface of the skin. Okay, so, Let me check something out right here. Okay. This says your sense of touch, nerve endings in the papillary layer register basic sensations. Nerve endings are your most abundant in your fingertips. Okay. Skin elasticity and skin color. Let's talk about skin color first. Oh, let's go here. This word comes up again. The color of the skin, whether fair or dark, depends on genetics and melanin. Melanin, however, is the primary source of skin color. Special cells called melanocytes produce pigment granules that are scattered throughout the germinativum and papillary layers. These granules are called melanosomes, and they produce the complex protein called melanin, a brown-black pigment that gives skin color and serves as a skin protective screen from the sun's rays. The amount and type of melanin is an inherent trait that varies among races and individuals. For example, dark skin contains more melanin than light skin. Okay. I mean, this is really interesting. If two Caucasian people have a baby, there are great odds that the baby won't come out with a whole lot of melanin. That's genetics. Okay. Skin elasticity. Elasticity is the ability for something to stretch and return to its normal state. Healthy skin is elastic. How does the skin get its elasticity? Well, let's talk about two things: collagen and elastin. Collagen fibers make up a large portion of the dermis and help to give support to the many structures found in its layer. When collagen fibers become weakened, wrinkles and sagging of the skin can occur. Elastin gives the skin its elasticity and flexibility and the ability to regain its shape after stretching. When healthy skin expands, it regains its former shape almost immediately. Conversely, one of the most prominent characteristics of aged skin is its loss of elasticity. So, I mean, this is self-explanatory, but collagen and elastin are very important in helping the skin to maintain its healthy look, keeping the skin elastic. Okay, glands of the skin. You have two types of skin duct glands. Let's talk about that. Sweat glands and oil glands. Your sweat glands are your sudoriferous glands, and your oil glands are called sebaceous glands. Your sudoriferous glands consist of a coil base called fundus and a tube-like duct that terminates at the skin surface to form the sweat pore. Practically all parts of the body are supplied with sweat glands, although they are more numerous on the palms, sole, forehead, and armpits. Okay, think about it. When you sweat, you usually sweat from your forehead, then your palms may sweat, soles of your feet may get damp, armpits may sweat. That's your sweat glands. It helps regulate your body temperature. Now your oil glands, let's say this about your sudoriferous glands. The nervous system controls the activity of these sudoriferous glands, which help regulate body temperature and help to eliminate waste products from the body. Heat, exercise, emotion, and certain drugs influence sweat gland activity. So you think about it. Let's say if you just ran 2 miles, you will probably be sweating. All right. Your next one is your sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands are also called oil glands. They are connected to the hair follicles. These glands consist of little sacs with ducts that help to open into the hair follicle where they secrete sebum. Sebum is related to moisture. This sebum helps to lubricate the skin and preserve softness of the hair. With the exception of your palms and soles, these glands are found in all parts of the body, particularly in the face and scalp. Okay, sebum, moisture. When the sebum becomes hardened and that duct in those sebaceous glands become blocked, a black head is formed. The primary function of sebum is to act as a shield that prevents moisture from evaporating from the skin surface. So the sebum helps us to keep our natural moisture. When those glands are blocked, that's when you will have a blackhead. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the absorption level of the skin. The skin serves as a protective barrier against microorganisms and chemical absorption. Some topical and products and creams are designed to penetrate this barrier for medicinal purpose. For example, antiseptics may be used to reduce the risk of skin infections, or vitamin creams used to support skin repair. The amount or level of absorption that takes place is dependent upon the thickness and location of the skin on the body, concentration of the product, and the frequency of the application. Okay. Functions of the skin. They actually have our mnemonic in a funny order because they have the P first, and the P is usually between the A and the E. But you remember your initial chapter talked about shapes, which represents the function of the skin. S stands for sensation, H heat regulation, A is absorption, P is protection, E is excretion, and S is secretion. Okay, sensation. The skin responds to your heat, cold, touch, pressure, pain, and movement through its sensory nerve endings. When you scratch an itch or pull away from a hot object, you are responding to the stimulation of sensory nerve endings and the message they conveyed to the brain. All right, your next one is heat regulation. Heat regulation is a function of the skin that protects the body from the environment. A healthy body maintains a constant internal temperature of about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. As the change occurs outside the temperature, blood and sweat glands make necessary adjustment to facilitate the cooling of the body. A, absorption. Absorption beyond the top layer of the skin is limited, but does occur. Some medications are designed to enter the body through the skin, where they are slowly absorbed and dispersed. Products designed for skin care are not intended to be absorbed beyond the top layer of the skin. Protection. The skin protects the body from injury and a multitude of pathogens. The outermost layer of the epidermis is covered with a thin layer of sebum, which renders it waterproof. The skin is resistant to variations in temperature, minor injuries, and some chemical substances, and many potential pathogens. The skin also provides protection for internal organs, arteries, veins, and bones. Excretion. Perspiration is excreted from the skin. Water lost by perspiration carries salt and other chemicals with it. Humans perspire 1 to 2 pints daily. Perspiration is made up of water, salt, and chemicals. S, secretion. Sebum is secreted by the sebaceous glands and lubricates the skin and the hair, keeping them soft and pliable. Sebum secretion is affected by hormones and emotional stress, which may increase the flow of sebum. All right, that does it for lecture 1 of week